Good evening, everyone. It is August 1st, 2022, Monday evening. This is Sanctuary episode 31. And I am Marcia here with our light transmission from Spirit. And for those of you joining for the first time, Spirit is the term that I use for the eagle-eye perspective of God, the part of God, source energy, whatever name you want to call the name without names, all that is able to both move through us, but also see the larger perspective of what maybe our human personality self is a little too close to the mirror to see. So these calls are all about gathering together to create a really high alchemical space that allows us to not only bring this transmission forth, allow it to kind of attune over us, because it doesn't always matter if we are mentally understanding it so much as just allowing it to flow through us and taking what resonates. And often we will find throughout the week that some of the themes that Spirit brought up or some of the supporting energies are showing up in our personal lives, or we might be seeing them out in the world, kind of reflected back to us from greater society. And each week, Spirit offers me usually, something to do with the energy of what's coming through, like a funny name or sometimes a serious name. And this time, the second that I went into meditation, I heard it's electric, and all these flashbacks of like sixth grade dances came back, and all I heard was boogie, woogie, woogie. And, the electric slide and this feeling that we're all going to be doing the electric slide through August, because we are moving into what Spirit calls a time of acceleration. This is a fast moving phase, and we're really going to be called to our intuition and our instinctual self, because the mind simply does not have the resources to kind of navigate the waters of where we are going. And specifically, Spirit said, knowing which thread to gently pull in order to unravel the knot without causing more entanglement. And that last part, without causing more entanglement, was really important from Spirit's perspective, that we're kind of at this boiling point, and collectively we are burgeoning into awakening, but we're also being led toward extreme conflict and extreme ways of living and being that Spirit is calling the squeeze. And ultimately, Spirit says this is leading to a person-to-person economy and a return to free energy, which already exists, but which we are not being given access to. And in the meantime, things can look pretty dicey to the human self. And so Spirit will always give us this energy read, but will also give us the supporting energies of how best to navigate this time of uncertainty, or this time where, we can't rely necessarily on our mental faculties or our logic and reason. It only is getting us so far. It's that whole like man plans, God laughs that kept coming up over and over in this reading, that, we might have big ideas right now, but Spirit, through world events and through our own individual and collective weaves, it's coming into a multiverse. In fact, Spirit called it two roads that diverge, and really two worlds, but which are coming back around into this multi-dimensional universe. So no longer are we necessarily playing on the grid of humanity that we were up until 1999. We have moved into a new frequency, if you will. And our choice in this now moment is collectively survival meltdown or return to sovereignty. So I'm going to take a moment to take a sip of water and let that settle in. And if anyone has anything they want to bring up in the chat regarding this, questions or comments, or feel free to speak, unmute as well. So Spirit asks us, what is the choice? And Spirit talks here about this survival meltdown, this collective meltdown, or this return to sovereignty. And Spirit also brought up strategic shortages and organized crisis. And what I felt was meant by this is that this is not like the divine plan as far as, the best that humanity can do. This is actually a narrative that is being served up, that we are being led toward conflict through staged conflict, through to actually create conflict with one another, which ultimately serves a narrative that is not serving our highest and greatest being. And so one of the questions here is to really pay attention to what narratives are being served up, particularly through the news, through social media. What are you being asked to believe in? Because these powers that were, they're not creator beings. They don't have this connection to source in the same way. They have, given that part of themselves away. So they need to rely on the magic of humanity to create the next dream. And they understand, better than we do at this point, to many degrees, what our mental and emotional and spiritual capabilities are. And so they're able to kind of invert that and turn that against us so that we don't really have that ability to know our own power, and we're more easily ushered into a narrative that is presented to us rather than necessarily the narrative that the divine wishes to create through us. And so this survival meltdown, or this return to sovereignty, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to go into fear, to go into that feeling of being squeezed or restricted or constricted. And at the same time, Spirit says simultaneously, there's going to be this massive heart awakening and this return to a person to person connection rather than this like top down hierarchical, very separate and disconnected way of living on this earth. And so as we kind of recognize that we're being led towards this conflict through staged conflict, and these narratives are being served up to us, we also understand that these are attempts to divide and separate from every angle. And Spirit called this the last grasps at power. Even though they may believe they have it in the bag, these powers that world, because they have the world now kind of in their grasp with this, larger psychological experiment. But Spirit is saying that humans are beginning to view it as such, and we're beginning to read with discernment. And while the human mind can be easily hypnotized and programmed and manipulated, it also can be easily activated with the spark of the Holy Spirit. And so Spirit says there's nothing to fear, yet we must all remain in connection with our own inner wisdom in order to navigate the way forward. You will be given what to think if you are not thinking for yourself. And Spirit called this entering the maze. And here Spirit also mentioned this is beyond thinking, really. If you're not thinking for yourself, it's really if you're not feeling for yourself. We're really being encouraged that the merge of instinct and intuition is really what is going to be the tool that allows us to navigate our way forward. And the last thing here Spirit wanted me to mention is that including but beyond TV, radio, and social media, there's also frequencies of programming now available in the atmosphere. And I don't have necessarily the correct human words that I want to use to describe this, but we'll call it interference, and we'll say that it's very easy to be kind of disoriented and turned around by this interference if we are not maintaining that connection to our own divinity, if we are not engaged in some way to keep our mind in a practice of quietude, in a place of non-reactivity, and if we are not able to connect with our feet on the earth or our hands on the trees or gardening. This is all so important right now, especially as we move through this accelerated time. Especially the next 4 to 6 weeks, but Spirit gave me a time frame of 3.5 to 4 months where it's kind of like hold on to the seat of your pants. If you are not grounded and anchored in a way that is connecting you to your own heart, it's going to be very hard to stand upright in this wave. So we are just really being encouraged to maintain that connection, to build that connection, especially that personal relationship, because the weave will speak to us in the most personal and humorous and loving and delightful and magical ways if we are simply open to receiving it. I'm going to take a moment and open the floor. The first supporting energy this evening is that we're asked to recognize that all the world is a stage, and that this is the end of a glamour, a collective illusion. And here the phrase, a storm's a comin'. And this feeling that the human is being asked, kind of like the Truman Show, to overcome a larger simulation and more than ever have the discernment to have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and a heart that knows. We're encouraged to listen with our whole being. The lyrics, I can feel it in my bones. Can you feel it in your soul? So this is beyond the mind. This is a felt sensation. This is a resonance, the ringing of the gong through every cell and fiber of our being. And here we're being asked to connect to something greater, and that which I call weave with the capital W, that which is guided by the Holy Spirit, but requires our presence and our receptivity in order to understand what gifts are being given to us in each moment. And this energy of the glamour and the two roads diverging, Spirit speaks to one having like a lot of allure and a lot of flash, and possibly even a lot of what we might call like false light or charisma that draws you in but doesn't have a lot of substance. And the other road has a lot of what we might call like deep confidence, but it's not flashy. It's very humble. It's very strong. It's very warm, but it's not going to have a lot of bravado or bring a lot of attention to itself. And the lyrics that came up during this part of the reading were, "Are you a life force?" And the feeling I got from Spirit was, are you going to be seduced by this path, that is, possibly even being presented on paper as, checking all the boxes for doing right by humanity. But if you feel into it, there's an icky vibe. There's a sinister, not right vibe to it. And are we going to have the confidence to take the path less traveled, this meek and humble inheriting the earth, this path of spiritual integrity? Are we going to be a life force? Are we going to be the soul of a space when we're being asked to do so? And the question here from Spirit is, what or whom is casting a glamour over humanity? This is a false or untrue representation that is shifting into a convergence with our higher selves. So even though it can be viewed from, especially, the lower dimensional perspectives as being a power over structure or a predator-prey structure, we also have to remember that our soul is using this false and untrue representation of self in order to bring us into that mirrored place, to kind of offer us that house of mirrors so that we can then converge with our divinity, to allow our soul to actually fully embody in this physical form. And this time is extremely powerful and positive in terms of our personal power. So what does that mean from Spirit? Well, it means the ability to stand on our own 2 feet, to be radiating our own light, to know with clarity what our heart desires. And Spirit says to meet the eyes of others with grace, to be warm, to be strong, to operate from a position of personal truth and strength rather than belief in our fatigue or low energy, or that we're too old, or our insecurities, infirmities, or injustices. We are remembering who we truly are, and we are invoking this power. And we will be connecting with others who see us and who also stop and share their attention, their respect, and their time with us. So if it's been a particularly isolating time for meaningful connection, Spirit is saying that is actually about to shift. However, with these 2 roads diverging, we will also have the opportunity to be surrounded by mirrors or others who believe us to be less than and probably will tell us so. We could feel that we're lacking confidence, the energy or the appearance, the image, even to handle a meeting or an opportunity that is arising for us. And Spirit is asking us to recognize that while that all might feel true to our human self, it's actually not true in the grander sense of things. To remember who we really are and to invoke the power, to know that we have the warmth, we have the strength, and to come once again from this position of personal truth and strength rather than a limiting belief system. And the last part of this part of the meditation was the phrase, walking amongst any and being their equal, the end of titles and nobilities. And we've talked in previous calls about this wave of energy coming to the planet that kind of knocks down anything that is not either a child, an animal, or someone who's right with God. And it doesn't matter if you're, a doctor, if you're a billionaire, if you have, all the most healthy relationships in the world, whatever we want to identify with as something that makes us who we are other than our core being. Spirit saying all that is going to be washed away. And so this is a really important time, not to keep beating the same beat on this drum, but to connect inward and to create that space mentally and emotionally and physically so that we can begin to anchor this truly into our physical form and begin to live our lives from this place of truth. I'm going to give it a second to open the floor, and then I will move on to the next supporting energy. The next energy from Spirit regarding this, how do you kind of deal with this electricity that's coming through these light codes that are both opening and activating us, but also potentially overwhelming us. And one of the things that came through is that perfectionism is not going to lead us where we would desire, but in fact will steer us from that. And Spirit also mentioned including believing that we know what others should be doing. So this is not only having these perfectionist tendencies for ourselves, but kind of projecting that onto others. We're also encouraged to notice any anxiety or obsessive habits or thoughts that may be coming back and cycling over and over, as well as energies of scrutiny or feeling like we are not good enough, knowing that that is kind of the shadow of some of the frequencies that are coming through, this feeling that nothing that we're doing can measure up. And this is why we're encouraged that we must connect to something greater than ourselves in order to make a meaning of what is coming next. And once again, here, Spirit had me mention the weave, where we are learning through receptivity and through meeting ourselves daily, in that connection with God, so that it's becoming a living prayer. It's not just that we are praying, a minute here and meditating 10 minutes there. We're living life in this constant flow of action and receptivity, but action within the Holy Spirit. So we're moving when the Spirit tells us to move, not when fear tells us to move. And that's what we're really being encouraged to flow into during this time of the squeeze. And the lyrics during this next section was, sometimes I get this feeling I was breathing someone else's air. And this sense from Spirit that a lot of humanity is just going to have this moment of like, shit, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to even go here tomorrow. I don't want to take one more step in this direction. This feeling that they had been breathing someone else's air this whole time or living someone else's dream. And that this tidal wave, and interestingly, the title of this song is Tidal, Tidal. This tidal wave of energy, of frequency that is coming is not going to allow us to breathe someone else's air any longer. It's not going to allow us to live a version of our lives that is not authentic and true to who we really are. And we will begin to see symptoms, if we are not already in the physical body, as our light body and the planetary body shift in our orientation towards this grander destination. And Spirit, even asked here, for those of you that are on the call tonight or in the replay, if you want to put into the chat anything that you've been noticing or you have noticed others experiencing, because we can always get our eyes and awareness on it and kind of come together on the after part of the call to just do some prayers and blessings and intentions of swift integration, because this is, a hard process sometimes on the human parts of the personality self, and especially the physical body and the mental and emotional bodies as they change from, one aspect to another. So what are you experiencing? What have you noticed other people experiencing? Feel free to post that in the chat if you are feeling called. We're asked and challenged to accept things as they are. So the human personality self has, a tendency to have an idea of what's going to happen, try to, build our way toward it, and then get disappointed or, go through all sorts of, low vibration feelings or reactions about, it not going our way. And, here comes back to the phrase of man plans, God laughs, particularly over the next 3.5 to 4 months. This is a tight squeeze energetically for humanity, and we will all feel it in our own way. And so this challenge to accept things as they are, to be in the flow, is going to allow us to be in joy. It's going to allow us to connect to play and to being in the inner child. If we are in projecting our future, I just heard the phrase world of hurt. So this feeling that, any mental projections right now are kind of castles in the sand. And the lyrics here to support that on Pandora, as I was writing this, were "It's stormy in the sea tonight." So just understanding that we're in an energetic storm right now, and we can be in the eye of it. We're being given all the tools to actually have a really joyful way through it, but we can also be tossed around quite a bit. And Spirit just giving us this moment of awareness, so that when we start to feel these feelings, we can say, oh, okay, like I already was, given this. I already knew that this was coming, and I can just sort of, ride this wave. I can actually step into the world and engage it without expectations, and know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And Spirit really wanted me to bring up this idea of the simulation tonight, or this feeling of like all the world's a stage. And also, if you're, a child of the 80s and the 90s, we had all the choose your own adventure novels. And Spirit said, this is a choose your own adventure, or have it chosen for us. So we're really in this place once again of, are you going to be thinking and feeling and intuiting for yourself? Or are you going to be kind of digesting and percolating on the narratives that are going to be served up to us left and right? And particularly, notice the frequency of these narratives. Are they divisive? Are they meant to separate? Because once you pull back and don't have an emotional attachment to the simulation, it becomes very easy to unravel it very quickly, especially with the discernment of the Holy Spirit. Spirit acknowledges that when we are connected to Source, our inner divinity, and the greater weave, we bypass this manufactured matrix and the narratives being offered to us by the low frequency beings who must manipulate and utilize our creativity and life force. So once again, it comes back to, these are God mimics. These are not beings that still have the divine life force where they are able to create on their own. So if we pull the power away, if we're no longer giving them our energy and our emotions, because they feed off of our human fear, our adrenaline, particularly in a, what we would, to the human self feel very negative to the human body. It's very delicious to this powers that were, we'll call it just the energy system that keeps that predator prey mentality going, because it serves and feeds them. So once again, just that connection to our inner divinity, and to remembering that this glamour does not have to be something that we are giving our energy to or believing in, and that just simply living our lives in our alignment is going to radiate that light and kind of break the spell for others and those around us. Just going to take a moment here and catch up with the chat. So there was a mention in the chat around fatigue, inhibiting movement, muting the flow. is this archonic. It feels otherwise, still able to maintain the connection, gratitude, yet out of the step of vibrant living. The feeling from spirit here is that there's so much kind of hitting us from every angle that if we are not really present, like really, really present, that we're gonna feel ourselves knocked around a little bit, and that the physical body is really just doing its best right now to integrate. So the more gentle that we can be with ourselves, without like beating ourselves up, criticizing ourselves, resting when we need to rest, eating when we need to eat, sleeping and moving, when the body is asking to do that, kind of what we talked about earlier about, moving when the spirit tells you to move, and resting when it tells you to rest. That is really what we're being encouraged right now, because if we have too much on our plates, it's really going to feel overwhelming. It's like we're birthing something on the light body and the level that we can't see. And yet, if we don't honor that fully, especially over the next 4 to 6 weeks, it's going to be much harder on the mental and physical and emotional body. Let me know if that makes any sense. The last supporting energy of the evening is this sacred silence, becoming the listener with the capital L. The question, how much have we missed because our spirit did not have the space or the, quote, wild quiet in which to speak to our soul? And I know for me, I was like, probably a lot, because, life is distracting. And so how much has our spirit, wanted to offer us, but simply did not have the space or the silence, the quiet to speak to us in this soulful way? And the question, what could we be aware of if we took the time to be still and silent? The whole world can be heard in a moment. And now is the time to have this powerful exchange, this holiness with the universe, to listen, to truly understand what it is that we are hearing. This is listening with the entire being, not just our ears. Our senses are the soul's messengers, and they will be electrified over the next few weeks. This is a portal of inception as we are birthing a new paradigm, and seeds are brought to flower. Simultaneously, humanity will experience a run on its sovereign freedom under God. The United States Constitution is a living document and is recognized as holy. Why? Our rights are granted by the Creator and not the powers that were, or from any man-made institution. And through the dissolution of what was, all will join with the frequency of freedom. Once again, the lyrics, I hear the storm is coming in. These are new lightning fast energetic codes which are streaming onto the planet as measures increase from the low frequency beings to enslave the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies of humanity. Listening with the whole being is absolutely essential at this time, as we cannot believe what we simply hear or see. This is a play of light and shadow to the highest degree. Dark magic is afoot, along with a quest for the revelation of the light and a new paradigm of peace for humanity. Ignore the talking, which takes up space and drowns out the messages of truth. Do not make so much noise that we drown out what the silence seeks to tell us. The messages will come in sweet, subtle, magical, spontaneous, joyous, and uplifting ways through amusement, awe, and delight. But we must remove ourselves from the hustle and bustle and from built up urban congestion. Get out in nature, preferably by water. And I had written here hot yang because Tom and I had been joking over the last, couple of weeks that it's getting so yangy on the planet right now that, if you're someone who really indulges in the yin part of life, you're really having to do a lot of going to the river. So there we are. There she is. So we're encouraged to find a still space of solitude and to seek the counsel of spirit, especially in nature. When the soul speaks, listen and come into alignment and act from the space of integrity. This is the time for peace and quiet. And Spirit mentioned here that we may have increased sensitivity to noise, or finding it hard to contemplate or think about what needs to be happening. So that kind of haziness or that confused state of being, where it's difficult to decide what our best course of action is due to this either interruption or an interference. And Spirit said, or these constant demands and distractions, this energy of one thing after another, which is demanding our time and attention. And if we do not kind of step back from that hustle and bustle, we're going to feel this intensity and electricity at a level that is going to be uncomfortable and overwhelming, rather than where we create space for it and it feels like joy and pleasure and vibrant life force. So we're encouraged to take mini soul excursions throughout the day. And Spirit was like, sit in the closet, sit in the car, like whatever you have to do to make your little mini soul excursion happen. Listen to soothing music and really surrounding ourselves with natural sounds, because there's this feeling that all of the senses are going to be overwhelmed, but particularly the clairaudience, particularly what's coming through our ears and is really connected to our nervous system. So getting out in nature, but around water specifically coming through. And if you can get out in the morning or the evening, when it's a little bit darker, that is coming through as well. Just because the light of the sun, coming through in, mid-afternoon right now, it may be overwhelming even to some people's senses as we move through this next energetic phase. So to end tonight, the light transmission from Spirit it's electric. And this feeling that we can either, boogie, woogie, woogie through this in a really beautiful way, or we have this opportunity to kind of really be taken out by this and in a very uncomfortable and overwhelming way. And that it's an acceleration, it's very fast moving. And if you imagine, being in a river that's really fast moving, if you're in a sturdy kayak and you know what you're doing and you've got all the right equipment, that's going to be the ride of your life. But if you're out there without a life jacket, that's sudden death. And so there really is this choice of this feeling of survival meltdown, of really buying into some narratives that are being served up on a platter that are really strategic and actually organized to lead us into conflict, or instead to be like, wow, like this is an attempt to divide and separate. And so I'm going to take a step back and keep my life simple and really beautiful and really connected to what is. This person-to-person economy, which is really the manifestation on the physical level of the fifth dimensional frequency, where on the other side, if we wanted to manifest a unicorn, we thought unicorn and there it was, and that got very, very boring. And so we jumped into these physical forms to be able to say unicorn, and maybe wait 20 years for that to show up in some way, like this feeling that time creates this buffer that allows us to forget that we are creators. But as we move into the fifth dimension where there is no time, the eternal now, we think about what we want, and then someone shows up in our life, could be total stranger, could be, someone that, is in our family, but they just happen to bring us that thing that we were thinking about. Like, oh, I don't even know why I brought this. I just, thought of you and here it was. That's how 5D works. You're not just solo. You are actually engaged in a connection at the same time that you are receiving your manifestation. And so it's a really beautiful and dynamic way to live. It makes every stranger a friend, and sometimes every friend a stranger, because you get to experience so many different aspects of yourself with these mirrors, these partners, as you go through this evolution. And we're not able to do this alone. We have to be together in order to create this next paradigm. And it's really actually already created. We're walking toward it, but we chose to know it. We chose to understand it, and we chose to play a part in it and to, be the leaders of it. And so even though these last grasps of power are occurring from beings that may not have humanity's best interest in mind, we do. And ultimately, it's the people who change the course of events and allow us to return to our original connection with our Creator, to no longer have this interference that prevents us from knowing the fullness of our human potential, and to remember not only who we are individually, but who we are together and with each other. So I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. I want to give an opportunity to speak up if there's anything that came forward. Otherwise, we can take a few seconds to kind of close out the space here, and I will meet everybody off the recorded call for our chat afterwards. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Your presence brings and makes this shape in such a beautiful way than if I were just kind of bringing this from spirit by myself out into the world. And everyone listening on the replay, we feel you too. We feel your energies. So thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.